You're listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. Did you know that indigenous people are custodians to 80% of the world's biodiversity, but are 19% of the world's poorest? Well, I had no idea, and I had a great time interviewing Indifly Executive Director Matt Shilling. We talk about some of the amazing projects that they're working on, such as the Ana Atoll project in French Polynesia, the Rewa Eco Lodge in Guyana, and the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, where they're working with indigenous communities to create sustainable livelihoods, improve health, food security, many other benefits through fly fishing. So hope you enjoy. And if you are enjoying listening to the Sustainable Angler podcast, it really helps out a lot if you could leave a rating and review on iTunes. That helps us get in front of more anglers who are interested in learning about how to protect what we love, which is what we're trying to accomplish through this podcast. So anyway, if you could do that, would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. This episode of the Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies, a sustainable business consultancy whose mission is to solve the climate crisis by helping your business go zero waste and carbon neutral. To learn more, visit emergerstrategies.com. Well, Matt, let's kind of get things kicked off with, who are you? What do you do? Tell us more about Indifly.
Yeah, sure. My name is Matt Shilling, and I'm the Executive Director of Indifly, as you mentioned. And Indifly is an organization that empowers indigenous communities to protect their remaining pristine places in the world. So we enable indigenous communities to own and operate fly fishing ecotourism businesses. These businesses provide sustainable livelihoods, generate community-wide economic benefits, and really create incentives for the protection of indigenous homelands. And listeners to your show may be asking themselves at this point, with so many global issues on the forefront today, why do y'all focus on indigenous communities? Yep. And the simple answer is because indigenous communities are vital. So let me just throw out a few facts about indigenous peoples for you. So they total 476 million in population, wow. 6% of the global population, but 19% of the world's poorest people. You have 5,000 different groups in more than 90 countries, so they have a large footprint. They occupy lands totaling about 22% of the land surface on Earth. And here's the kicker that I think is one of the most important things in why we do what we do. Indigenous peoples are custodians of 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity.
Whoa.
80%, right? Another question, that people may be asking themselves at this point is look, I know Rick likes fly fishing, right. But is it really a viable solution, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is, fly fishing is a proven successful model. And I just thought I'd share a few reasons of why it works. So one, it's familiar. Many of the communities in which we operate already know how to fish because they fish to put food on the table for sustenance, right?
Yep.
So we simply expand on the expert local knowledge and introduce a new tool, which is fly fishing, which drives tourism to their communities. Of course, there's a lot of local entertainment derived from this introduction to fly fishing, right? Generally, people think we're a bit crazy trying to catch what is often eaten locally in the least effective way possible, and then having the audacity to release it in front of them. It's entertaining, and generally the people, the locals, the indigenous communities that we're serving think we're a bit crazy in the beginning, but once people start coming down, they quickly get it. Another reason why is it's sustainable, right? Yep. This goes into what we're going to talk a little bit more about. So all Indifly projects are rooted in science and are strictly catch and release. Okay. So what that does is this instills a deep conservation ethic from the beginning, which results in not only an improved experience for visiting anglers, right? But this mindset of conservation for the future locally.
Yep.
Just a quick aside, anyone that's more interested in the science, I don't think we'll spend a lot of time on it today, but our science team is really strong. So you can find, I think there's 6 today, peer-reviewed publications from our work on the website. Our science team cranks out papers at a seemingly unprecedented rate. And as they become available to the public, which isn't all that quick,
Sure.
we like to throw them up on the website so people can read them. And really the last reason of why it works, but certainly not the least, is it can be lucrative, right? We're trying to create sustainable livelihoods and jobs, and done right, ecotourism operations can drastically improve a community's sustainable bottom line. So when I talk about sustainability, I talk about it in kind of these pillars that we always use, right? So there's the cultural side, there's the economic side, and there's the environmental side. And we try to focus on all of those when we talk about sustainability. And our model really results in the creation of sustainable livelihoods, improved health, food security, the ability for communities to stay together. All of those things is the culmination if we're successful.
Yep. Well, so first off, that's all amazing. And I've been really stoked about doing this interview because I've been following Indifly for a while, and I've always thought that I was just like, man, that's what y'all do is so unique, but I had and valuable, but I had absolutely no idea about some of those stats. That's pretty incredible. Obviously, the big one, a couple ones that stuck out to me was 80%. They're basically stewards of 80% of the remaining biodiversity, but also 19, I think, percent of the world's poor. And so it sounds like to me, with what y'all do with fly fishing and introducing them into these communities, is you're helping to solve a problem for them, to me, or I would think, and that you're providing a livelihood for these communities and lifting them out of poverty, while also providing them with I guess you could consider fish a renewable resource when you introduce that conservation ethic to them.
Yeah, and look, it's in the end, it's much bigger than fish, right? So the model that we kind of use in our heads and in practice is, if we can create opportunities for economic growth locally, because you shouldn't be naive enough to think that these people aren't touched, right? Almost every community in the world has moved from a barter economy to a monetary economy. I always tell this story. I'll just deviate for a minute, if that's all right. I always tell this story about my first trip to Rewa, which was even before Indifly was formed. But, I didn't know what to expect, really. And I expected to go see loincloths and spears, man, right? I mean, you think about your 300 miles in the middle of the rainforest, that's what you're going to find. And what I got was Ed Hardy t-shirts.
Really?
Ed Hardy t-shirts. And so, what happens is, so there it's a little bit different. You're in the Amazon basin, rainy season to dry season, the water levels will drop, 40 feet, let's say, on average. And so during the dry season, you can get, to most of these communities by a road. And what happens is, foreign mining camps and timber harvesters drive around to these villages and offer gifts in exchange for timber rights or mining rights, usually. Sometimes those gifts are cash. A lot of times it's just, here's a truckload of stuff. And, so my point is, when we talk about creating opportunities for economic growth, those can be good and bad, right? Those can be destructive in many cases, but they can also be empowering. And so what we really focus on is how do we create economic growth in a way that is going to empower communities to conserve resources. And that's not just fish, right? In the case of, let's just stick with Rewa for simplistic sake, they are owners of a big chunk of rainforest, right? And so it's not just protecting fish, it's giving them the ability to protect the other resources, right? Timber, mining, all those things, minerals. So yeah, again, and then that cycle just keeps going and going and going, right? So the more opportunities for economic growth we can create, the more the community feels empowered, the more they're able to conserve resources, the better those resources are. In theory, the better the economic opportunity is from them in our model, right? And
Yep.
so, it's just this cycle, if we do it right, that it is, just ever changing or ever moving.
So that's awesome. And that's kind of, I was actually reading something about this the other day, but it's like, it's, I guess what you would call a virtuous cycle, right? It's like you create good economic growth that leads to empowerment, that leads to, so that you're creating this, because the reality is it sounds like, and honestly, I did get kind of wrapped around the axle on thinking about conservation of the fish. I didn't even think about the fact that these indigenous cultures are feeling pressure from the outside world to say, look, you actually do have something that's valuable. We want it. And, we basically can hoodwink you and, give you this, like you said, truckload full of gifts, and you're going to give me the rights to your land, which is that's bad economic growth. And that's really, incredible, because now that kind of ties back to, okay, well, you're helping to lift some of these communities up with good economic growth, but also protecting biodiversity at the same time, which is incredible.
Yeah, and let me just jump in and make this point, Rick, which I don't think everybody's familiar with. But so the Indifly model is one in which these operations are 100% community owned and operated. Indifly doesn't take a stake. We're willing to invest in their success, obviously, and provide technical and other tools to ensure that success. But at the end of the day, this is their business, right? And that's the only way it works, to be honest, right? They have their own destiny in their hands, right? And we think that we can help them along the way. But we also aren't the people who come in and say, we have the solution to everything. Here's some money, here's some tools, here's some resources. Let us fix this for you. Because that model is a short-term model. That model, hopefully what we do in projects outlives all of us. And the only way it does is if it's their project and their business, right? So, just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important, because they have to have the ownership, and it's not you coming in and dictating that this is the way that it should be done, which is great. And so let me ask you this, Matt. How did this get started? I mean, what you mentioned that, like, you went to the Amazon before Indifly even began, which has kind of got me interested in learning a little bit more about the history of Indifly.
Yeah, sure. So Indifly was really born or formed out of this Costa Sunglasses led project in Rewa. Okay. So to give you the short version of the story, and then we can expand on anything you want to hear more about. But so Costa Sunglasses had a pro who was doing some guiding unrelated to fish in the Rupununi region of Guyana, which is where Rewa is. And the guide, they stayed at Rewa for a night, and he kind of fell in love with the people and the culture. And he also knew that they had arapaima, which is a very unique species of fish. And so he comes back and he's telling his contacts at Costa, look, these people have made this really hard decision in that, unlike some of their peers in the region, they want to see resources conserved. No one's coming, right? So what can we do to help them? And so Costa put together a small team to figure out how to try and help them. I was fortunate enough to be part of that team. And so we all went down and figured it out in the end. And when we talk about projects, we can expand a little bit more on Rewa and what it looks like. But in the end, we created this model that we felt could be replicated in other parts of the world. And so, that kind of core group got together and said, look, not one company or not one individual should be responsible for taking all this on. Let's start a nonprofit, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And certainly there's the question of, does the world need another nonprofit? And so we thought long and hard about it, but at the end of the day, we decided to form our own unique organization and replicate the model in other places in the world. So that's the short and skinny of it. But
yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. And so so you mentioned obviously REWA, and I kind of do want to kind of dive in and learn a little bit more about the individual projects. Where else do y'all have projects going on in the world?
You bet. So in my head, we kind of tier projects out, right? So you have active projects, and then what I call projects in some form of development. And then we have this list that's ever growing of projects that we think the model could work in, given all the internal resources that we need, funding, people, et cetera. So those are kind of the three tiers. And so our active projects, there's three of them. So REWA, which is, again, Guyana, South America. Anna Atoll, which is in French Polynesia, and the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming.
Okay.
And so if you'd like, I'll just kind of give you what each of those looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So REWA, again, Rupununi region of Guyana, truly like special place. You're in the Amazon basin. There's hundreds and hundreds of species of fish. I always liken it to walking into a Disney movie. Like you're on this boat and all of a sudden, this, 50 blue macaws or, whatever. I'm not a bird guy, but, we'll just come, flying by your boat. And then, you hear monkeys and you see a harpy eagle and, there's jaguars. I mean, stuff everywhere. Right. And it's just beautiful. And so they're a community just shy of 300 people. And they have the village and Eco Lodge. They also have Arapaima, which is what our fishing operation, or their fishing operation rather, targets. So you have, this prehistoric, air-breathing, dinosaur that lives in these waters around REWA. So again, I mentioned rainy season and dry season, that drop. So generally during the rainy season, they live in the rivers. And during the dry season, when that water recedes, they become trapped in these ponds in the middle of the jungle. And so that's when you can target them, right? Is when they can't swim wherever they want to swim. And so, again, REWA made this tough decision that they want to conserve the resources and not sell off rights and conserve their fish and wildlife populations. But the community really needed to support itself, as we talked about. Again, they had already moved away from that barter economy. And so, fast forward a few years, we figured out how to catch Arapaima on a fly with regularity, which isn't always easy. And a lot of that is based on local knowledge, right? I mean, I should preface this by, I'm by far the worst fly angler involved in this organization. So, for all you technical experts out there, don't judge me. But, the thing is, I look at, you're in this pond and in this hand dug out canoe, and the fish are super sketchy. And so you're quiet and everything around you is quiet. And, you see, again, they're obligate air breathers, right? So they roll. And then the idea is to, time those rolls, and they roll, basically to the minute. You can time it. And, Rovin or whomever the local guy is in the boat will say, all right, cast 50, 75, however many yards at 3 o'clock in 30 seconds. And the idea is to, put your fly so they see it and notice that it's there. Anyway, again, long story short, not an easy task to figure out how to catch those things. I know that you've interviewed Oliver White on this podcast before. He's got great stories because he and another guy named Matt Brewer were the people to go down and do it. And so, I'm kind of bouncing all around here, but fast forward, we figured out how that could work. Now we had to figure out how to get people down there. Right. You're at that point in time, you're dealing with a community that is off the grid in every way. Right. Yep. There's no connection. They, if they have a health emergency, they get on the shortwave radio and they call the next village. It calls the next village. It eventually gets to Georgetown. Right. Wow. And somebody comes 2 days later. So type of thing. But, so my point is, it's not like they can send emails out and market and, do all that. They do that now based on the reinvestment back in the business, which I'll get to. But, then we had to figure out, how do we get people down here? Yep. And, how do we get the right people down here? Right. And because while you can have an amazing time fishing for peacock bass and arowana and piranha and all the other hundreds of species that are down there, the real target, and if you're going to spend that money and that amount of time to go down there, you want to catch a giant prehistoric animal that takes 2 or 3 people to hold up and all those things. So we figured that out, right? And so we figured out how to get people down there, and then we had to figure out how to improve the experience. Right. So how can we make the best experience possible? And so that's where hospitality training comes in. Right. Mm-hmm. So, here's a community of 300 people. We want it to be 100% operated by the community. Let's train some people up on hospitality and moving boats and all that thing. And so if you go back to our model, I talk about it as a hub and spoke a lot. So in Rewa, you have an eco lodge, right? And let's call that the hub. And then off that hub, our goal is to create as many small scale entrepreneurial activities around it, right? So, that can be people who cook. That can be people who clean the cabins while people are out fishing. That can be somebody who raises chickens and so people have eggs in the morning. You can make all those things. Another really cool component that we've implemented in Rewa and in Anna is this idea of local data collection, right? So the science team will come down and we tag every fish. We do weight and girth on every fish. As you can imagine, recapture rates are few and far between, but we want to have a better understanding. And so, what we're able to do now is provide some jobs through data collection too. So, science team trains up a local person on how to do these measurements, how to appropriately tag a fish, how to read a tag, how to do all those things. And that creates more jobs, right? Some of the jobs are just simply moving boats between ponds. And so you can get really creative in how you create jobs in one of these projects. That just goes a long way, right? So, backing up, it used to be that mostly the men would leave Rewa to go work in a mining camp or go work somewhere else. And what happens there is they're gone for months at a time. And by the time they get back, having to pay for their travel and meals and all those things while they're away, they aren't making much money, in some cases breaking even. And, it was really hard on the families for those men to be gone for so long. And so now, with that hub and spoke model, you're able to, the Eco Lodge is basically able to employ and find a job for anyone who wants to stay, which is quite amazing. So that's a really cool job creation success story.
Yeah.
There you also have some pretty amazing conservation success stories, right? So if you go back in time, even before we were there in that region of Guyana, you're talking about, let's say a 200-pound fish on average up to, 300 pounds, let's say. That feeds a lot of mouths, right?
Yeah.
And so at one point, Arapaima were in jeopardy of becoming extinct. And so, the decision was made to conserve the species, but now they've taken it to a whole different level, right? So I had this amazing story that was told by Rovin, one of the guides. He's the head guide and now chairman of the Eco Lodge. He's kind of our point person there, if you will. And he, we get this random email, just got back from saving Arapaima. And he expanded on it. And what they did was, again, rainy season, dry season, that 40-foot drop, they hadn't had a record rainfall in almost a year and a half, 2 years. So, natural evaporation, other things, those ponds will dry up just like any other place, right? And so if the water doesn't flood the jungle enough for those fish to get out, they're trapped there, and then they become susceptible to predation, right? Everything there wants to kill you, and it also wants to kill those fish, right? So, you have risk of jaguars, you have risk of birds of prey, coming down and feeding on these fish. And the villagers were very concerned about that. So what they did was they went and took canoes and filled them with water and put Arapaima from the ponds into the canoe and drug them across the rainforest to put them back in the river so they'd survive. Wow. Knowing that that fish is their ability to, create jobs and reinvest in their community and do all these things now, right? Yep. And so that just shift in mindset is like, wow, okay, this is working. Look, they're ultimate conservationists. We shouldn't be surprised, but it was just a really cool story, right? And so you then, let's fast forward a little bit to where we are today, and the success of that fishing business this year aside, because COVID, right? They've done pretty well. And so what that results in is this ability to make reinvestments in their community, right? So again, it's their business. They choose what they do with profits. We, of course, will say, hey, here are some good practices, or here are some things that you can do. But at the end of the day, it's their decision. But what they have done is they've, improved education. They've expanded their school. They built a computer lab. They, hired some teachers. They improved their healthcare. So there's a health post now. Wow. In the village. They put in satellite internet. Some of that is good and some of that is bad, right? When you talk about influence on a culture, you have a community that wasn't connected at all, and now they have internet, right? And all the good and bad things that come with that. Yes, it's great because they can interact directly with customers and share pictures and stories and all these things. And the client relationship improves, but you also have all the derogatory things that come with internet connection, right? Solar power, and just really this overall improvement in day-to-day life that they've been able to reinvest in. And so, look, maybe this is going aside a little bit here, but, there's many spectacular places to fish around the world. One of the things that I think sets Indifly projects apart from other places is this ability to immerse in the local culture while fishing in a place where very few people have fished, right? And that's kind of across all of our projects. So, the stories that people tend to tell their friends and family are having less emphasis on the size or number of fish caught, but rather now revolve around the amazing locals they met and the unique culture they were introduced to and the impact that they know they're able to have in a community simply by doing what they love to do.
Yeah. And that's super cool. And that's something that, increasingly it's just I guess it's the way of the world, but it's like, I kind of talk about it, just what you mentioned, having this unique experience with a culture. The bigger the world's population grows and the more interconnected we all get, you're starting to lose some of that. So it's incredible that you could go have a truly unique experience. And particularly there, you kind of described it, what I was envisioning in my head, which was like, it's like a Disney movie or something. It's like a true untouched paradise, rich in biodiversity. And I have always kind of been obsessed a little bit with archaeologists and Indiana Jones. That's kind of what where my head's at with it. Like this
Yeah.
truly like exploratory type of a feel, which is awesome. But I also love to hear about the success stories, particularly there, and them understanding that, without Indifly, they're in a position where they're breaking even to go travel to basically do what they have to do to provide for their family. And through fly fishing, it sounds like y'all have built a sustainable economic growth engine for that community to improve and sustain itself in a way that's probably a lot more desirable than having to go travel and work in a mine or do whatever it is they have to do to provide for their families. So I do, because I do have an interest, particularly in French Polynesia, just because I'm mildly obsessed with which who isn't. I had an opportunity. My wife and I, we went to Moorea and Rangiroa a few years ago before we had kids, and went on a trip, and and that was my bucket list trip. And so I've always been fascinated with the culture and the beauty of French Polynesia. And so I'd love to learn a little bit more about what y'all have going on there with that project.
Yeah, sure. So let me just back up, and I feel like I should say this. So, the people in Rewa are amazing, and I have no doubt that they would have figured out something on their own eventually.
Yeah.
We were lucky to be able to help them along and maybe, speed up that process a little bit. But again, this is their success more than it is ours.
Yeah.
We're really proud of that. So, so now we have this model that has seen some success, and which presents this natural roadmap, if you will, to scale into other places of need around the world. And so we're looking at places, and a gentleman had reached out who has a fishing operation on this atoll in French Polynesia, which is really unique, called Tetiaroa, and it's amazing fishing if you can ever get there. And it's the famous Marlon Brando estate owned atoll. And so he asked if we'd come check it out. We did so, and there you have. So what happened was the Brando estate signed this, very, very long-term lease for a developer in the U.S. to build one of these bungalow type resorts on the atoll. Beautiful place, amazing fishing. Our model revolves around community, and there is no community there, right? There's like one local that lives there. And he was the only one. And now, you have this resort, which is staffed, largely by people that are not from French Polynesia. And so, we looked at it as like, this is great and it's beautiful, but, our community, our model, again, revolves around a community. So it just doesn't really work from us. But what's cool about French Polynesia, and you kind of touched on this, is there's 118 islands and atolls in French Polynesia. So if you can make it work somewhere, in theory, you can make it work pretty quickly in other places, right? And within French Polynesia. And so we looked for another place. The same guy had been to Anna in the past, and he's like, all right, I think this is it. And so we went to Anna and immediately fell in love. So you have a population of roughly 500 people, down from about 5,000 in the past. I'll get a little bit into the reasons why. You have this amazing culture where Anna is known as the warriors, right? So, they were the conquerors of that archipelago. And so, they would go and conquer all these things and come back, and, there's just endless stories and pride in their dominance as an atoll. And so, I could go in a million different directions, and I'd love to tell all those stories, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to. But there's a couple reasons why you've had this decline in population. So, you go there, and it's kind of an elongated atoll, and you can go visit different villages where people used to live, and now they're all congregated on one end of the island or atoll, and the reason why the population has decreased are twofold, really, in my eyes. One, every kid on that island leaves at 11 to go to school. So they have, what we would call elementary school on Anna. But then they leave, and they leave home, and they leave their families. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I have a kid almost that age. I can't imagine like shipping him off and seeing him twice a year to go to school. So that's how it works there. And then, they end up in what we would call high school in Tahiti, which is, a proper city. And they end up staying because there's really no economic opportunity for them back home. And the largest economic driver on the atoll for in the recent history has been this product called the copra. So everything around life there revolves around the coconut tree. And this is certainly part of it. So each family has what's called they call it the sector. And they go out to the sector and they harvest coconuts, and they cut them in half and dry them out in the sun. And then the French government gives them a subsidy to do that. And it ends up in this burlap bag, and they ship them off, and it gets further processed into like coconut oil and things that you would find in a store. And there's a couple of reasons why that's hard now. One, it's really hard work. And two, you've had some natural disasters that have diminished tree populations, and families have grown. And so my point is, not everybody is able to do that full time anymore, right? And so you have a real need to have families reunited. I mean, it is a big thing, right? So one of our head guys there, his name's Raphael. His daughter recently left, a couple years ago now to go to France, just because there was no opportunity for her to stay on the island. And I saw firsthand the toll that takes on someone. Anyway, so we go check out Anna, and it's an amazing place, amazing fishery, picturesque flats, a pretty strong reef fishery. And I'll never forget this moment. We were sitting in a driveway, as you do on an island like that, and talking, and, we were just creating conversation, and we're like, what's your favorite fish to eat here? Immediately, the answer is bonefish.
Really?
Immediately. Which is, you don't hear everywhere, right? And, it's one of those things that we learn is deeply rooted in this specific island's culture. And so, we're like, well, that is primarily what people would be targeting, right? So, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. But again, back to the science and conservation, the last thing we want to do is bring a bunch of people in and impact their ability to catch bonefish and eat them, right? I mean, we would never ask them not to eat bonefish. So we needed to make sure that fishery was sustainable enough to allow additional pressure. And so we helped fund a scientist that lived there and finished his PhD on this work. And amazing guy. I mean, I'm convinced he's the only person that could do that. You have, again, the warrior culture, and you're messing with their favorite thing, right? And he had to develop relationships with every local, and, he had to just go through the multiple layers of building trust enough to where he could simply go to the water in the morning and ask to count fish, right? And so, and he did a bunch of other things, but, so we did data collection for quite a long time there, again, with the reason being that is important to them, so it's important to us.
Yep.
And so, The data showed that it was really not a sustainable fishery, but you always have to balance, economic opportunity with science a little bit. And so we did start sending a few people there, working with a booking agent, and but we made sure that it was known that these are a few things. One, this is research angler trip, right? So you're going to have a scientist on your boat, and you're going to have to take the time to make sure that we get data from that fish after you land it. And you're one of the first people to go there, so we asked for your patience, and all those people were amazing, and it worked out. But we weren't quite ready to open up the floodgates. And so as we started and kind of in the middle of this data collection process, we got really involved with the local school on the island. And again, this is all Alex, the scientist, but he developed a relationship with the school kids that ran deep, and he was helping them figure out, how fish move around the atoll and all this stuff. And long story short, the kids fell in love with it, and they took ownership of it. And the director of the school there is great, and he ran with it. And so they were able to get established this marine educational area. And so what happens is, unlike other atolls, Anna has very little tidal inflow. And so there's basically one spot on the whole island where bonefish can go out to spawn. And what you have is these ancient, like ancestral, almost stone maze traps that these fish swim into, right? And so they go down this pass, and you can go right and you get caught in this maze, or you go left and you make it out to spawn. And when they go right, they swim around, and they eventually end up in these traps called that are chicken wire. And there are public traps and there's private traps. The private traps are a business in and of themselves, right? And so you can go out to the public trap and take bonefish out and take them and do whatever you want with them. But a few families own these private traps, and they go in and collect their bonefish and then sell them in the community, right? Great business. But you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of bonefish, right, at their most vulnerable stage when they're going out to spawn. And so you're basically cutting off the legs of a vulnerable population already. And so Alex educated the kids on all this stuff. And, they got super behind it, and we bought them a drone, and they could fly over the spawning aggregation and see. And then we, gave them some software where they could count the fish, and they got really into it, long story short. So they worked with, the school director really worked with, the government in French Polynesia to create a marine educational area in that spawning aggregation area, right? And so now you have some teeth around it. It's protected. And the kids every day would go out every afternoon, and they would collect samples of, different species of what's living in the water, and they got into it. And then, let's fast forward a little bit. So now we understand that this bonefish population is not sustainable, right? So we look for what's called a spawning potential ratio. And, in the beginning, it was about 9, right? So a sustainable fishery is about 20%.
Okay.
And so, in the next generation, and it may take longer than that, but relatively soon, that population is going to collapse, and they won't be able to eat and enjoy bonefish, or they won't be able to put bonefish on a plane and send it to their family in Tahiti or wherever, right? And that's really important to them. And the adults are like, look, there's been bonefish here my whole life. There's always going to be bonefish. And the kids are like, look, and granted, these are kids under 11. They're like, you need to look out here a little bit and take me into account. And so what they did was they wanted to do this thing called a rahui, which is this Polynesian ancestral, they call it a political move. What it really is it's a moratorium on harvest of a species, and they exist elsewhere, like on giant clams and some floral fauna type things, and other islands and atolls. But there hadn't been one on Anna in 100+ years. And so this was a big step, right? I mean, you're talking about asking people not to catch the thing to love, the thing they love most, for a period of time throughout the year, right? And so what the kids did was they literally got a bus and they went door to door, and they said, "Look, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, I want you to start thinking about making decisions for me and not just for your generation." And they were able to enact a Rahui. And
Wow.
so it is just this amazing, like if you were to ask me, where do you see this going? That wasn't even in the possibilities. Right.
That's incredible.
And I mean, it's all the kids, right? I mean, they are true leaders in this regard. And so, they enacted a Rahui. So the Rahui is in effect for 3 months out of the year during the spawning season, and it's a moratorium on harvest again. So you can't capture and kill bonefish during those 3 months, and which allows them to go out and spawn and come back, hopefully. And so that kicked off a couple of years ago. We did this big ceremony, and the reason why I tell this story is it comes back to Alex. So we did this big ceremony. It's very culturally driven. Everybody comes out, and like we were each asked to bring a stone, a rock from our home area, and we'd place the rock on this mantle where they actually sacrifice some bonefish, and they stay there throughout the year. And we go around, and at night at a different event, we're kind of all saying where we were from, and Alex stands up and says, "I'm Alex," and everybody applauses, and he gets to "I'm from," and he's from Hawaii and California. He's going to say one of those two things, and everybody just screams, "Anna!"
Oh,
And
wow.
they've just really adopted him, and it was just a really cool sight to see. Anyway, bouncing all around here, I apologize.
No,
But
no, this is
so
great.
the effectiveness of that Rahui is documented, right? So it was a 5-year Rahui, so we're kind of in the middle of it right now. And look, a lot of things can change, and like true scientists, our science team are often hesitant to say this is working or this is not working, because there are a million multipliers on that
Sure.
can change weather, tides, all those things, moon phases. And so but what we have documented is this 10% increase in that spawning potential ratio, right? So now you're up to about 19, and 20 is a sustainable population. And so we're getting pretty close. Now our target spawning potential ratio, I call it SPR, I'm trying to spell it out, is much higher than that, right? I mean, we wanted to see it flourish. So we still have some work to do, but that's been another amazing conservation success story of the people of Anna, and really the kids of Anna, right? So there you're creating some generational change.
Yep.
You're in mindset, which is really, really cool to see. And, those kids are so proud of themselves, and we're so proud of them. And it's just really cool to see.
I mean, that's like I got chill bumps when you were telling the story about Alex when they said that. I mean, that's so inspiring. And one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm hearing is, whether it's in Rewa or in this case French Polynesia, there's a problem with finding jobs, and that is a significant driver. That is that the problem that y'all are helping to solve, and in the process you have these amazing conservation success stories that happen to be related to fly fishing, but it's from what I was hearing, it's like, okay, well, in Rewa, they'll have to leave for a number of months. In French Polynesia, they're leaving to go get an education and may not come back because they know there's no opportunity for them to prosper. Is that, am I wrong in thinking that or saying that, or is that kind of what y'all are helping to achieve?
No, absolutely. Again, it goes back to a couple things, that cycle, right? Of conserving resources, economic opportunity, empowering communities, all those things, right? It also comes back to those three pillars of conservation, or three pillars of sustainability that we talk about a lot. And, one of those is cultural, right? And so, in almost all these areas that we operate, family is a huge part of their culture. And so, while we focus on a lot on, making sure we're doing socioeconomic studies to ensure that, a bunch of largely white people aren't coming down and changing their way of life or introducing them to things that can be negative. There's also that play in what can we do to ensure that families stay together, and because it is a big part of their culture. And so, it's definitely a main driver for us. We talk about fishing a lot because that's the tool that we use for all of this.
Yeah.
But what we should be talking about more is sustainable livelihoods and the human impact of what fly anglers are able to do, right? Yep. There's this big push in the fly fishing industry to introduce more people to sport, as there should be, and they're having some success. This is one area where, I think that we should talk about a lot more, which is, look, when you go visit a place to fish, you have more of an impact than you realize, right? I mean, you come to an Indifly project, ask somebody about how the fishing business has changed their day-to-day life. I mean, they'll talk your ear off, right? And so that is, a fault of our own. We should be telling more stories about what you just said: job creation, sustainable livelihoods, reinvestment in communities, all those things, because that resonates pretty wide.
Yeah, and one of the things too that I do want to hear about the Wind River Range too. By the way, we're gonna but one of the
we'll get to
it. but one of the things that I want to drive home is, so there's always, with the nature of my business is a sustainable business consultancy. What the same thing you're describing is what is also, which I know you're familiar with, but is the triple bottom line, right? And so if you're a business, you want to not just measure your economic bottom line, but also what is your impact on society? What is your impact on the environment? And what Indifly does is really the perfect example of this. It is a look, we can conserve resources, we can create jobs, we can improve our build our culture and our society up. Empower is the word that y'all use, which is perfect for this. But it's really kind of if anyone was ever looking for, well, provide me with an example of a triple bottom line business model or a sustainable business model, sustainable development, I think that you'll have it here. So that would be your exhibit A. So that's my that's my sustainable business lesson of the day. But I think that's super cool and an important kind of connection to make between how sustainable business models work. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, appreciate that, and that's kind of you to say. Look though, none of this happens without the community's buy-in.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're inherently sustainable in almost every project we work in. Right. These are people who want to conserve their resources. They just may not realize the impact they're having or how to, make it sustainable generationally. And that's what we really look to do across all those pillars of sustainability. Is we aren't in it for the short term, right? We want to create long-term generational change. Mm-hmm. And so, or sustainability. And so, that's really what we focus on. But again, these are the community's successes, more so than they are ours. And it's their drive that makes these things happen.
Well, let's talk about Wind River success story and that project. That might be a good segue into learning more about that. And that's here in Wyoming. Is that right? And I say here in the U.S. and in Wyoming.
Yeah. So this is our newest project. So going out of Anna, we again, if you look at a map, if you will, you're trying to create this portfolio of places that are diverse, both in terms of a price point and geographical diversity and experience, all those things. And so we look at it and said, there's a need here, right here at home. Why aren't we doing anything here? And so the Wind River Reservation, for those who aren't familiar, again, in Wyoming, is one of the most spectacular, wild, and remote places left in the lower 48. Rich in native culture, history, unlimited outdoor recreation opportunities here. But again, it has challenges, just like every other reservation system in the United States. So there's 2 tribes on the reservation. So the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes, it's 2.3 million acres. It's
Wow.
giant, right? Again, face many of the same challenges other indigenous communities around the country face: lack of economic opportunity. You're in central Wyoming, right? So unlike places that are, or reservations located around an urban environment where enrolled members can go get jobs in cities, that doesn't happen here, man. You're in the middle of nowhere, right? Substance abuse, violent crimes, high suicide rates, and just this general disconnect from nature are some of the challenges that people, especially youth, face growing up on the reservation, right? It has been and probably continues to be kind of the poster child of all things wrong on the reservation system. But the people there are just absolutely amazing. There's so much pride about being born on the reservation, and they want to stay on the reservation, and they want to, make an impact. But here's the thing, again, central Wyoming, if you don't work for one of the tribal governments, or which includes casinos, there's really no place for you to work. You can go to Lander or Riverton or, one of these smaller towns that are outside the reservation and get a job, but you're also competing with other people. And it's just one of those places where, people want to stay on the reservation, again, just don't have the opportunity to do so. So, 2.3 million acres, central Wyoming, beautiful place. Natural resources are by far that reservation's largest asset, right? The protection of those resources falls on the Tribal Fish and Game Office, which is a group of 5 people. So you have a director, 3 wardens, and an office manager, and they are amazing, dedicated individuals. Just imagine for a second trying to patrol a piece of land that takes 8 hours to drive across with a team of 4 people, right? So you have all those issues that you have in other places, poaching, crime, all those things. It's a really tough job given the size and scope, but you'd be greatly challenged to find a team more dedicated to not only the protection of that reservation, their homeland, but also creating opportunities for youth. So, one of the first trips we did there is we got involved with this youth organization that was all about mentorship, and we wanted to take a bunch of kids camping. And so me and a couple other guys, did this trip with, a group of 8 or 10 kids who were in the program. And, we slept in teepees, buy some water and, fished and did all this stuff. And really, this was on me, but I kind of expected to go there and learn from them, right? As much as I could about their culture and the reservation system and whatever. And what we quickly found out is that they, face the same challenges as every other kid in America for their time, right? School, video games, all those things. There, what you have though is, due to numerous things, most of those kids were being raised by their grandparents. And so you have, an older population trying to take care of a younger population, But yet that older population really doesn't have the ability anymore to take them in the backcountry and go to ancestral sites and teach them all the cool, significant things that happen on the reservation. And, so what we found was the majority of those kids, and there were a couple of exceptions, but the majority of them had never been off the highway system on the reservation. Right.
Wow.
And so, you have paradise in your backyard in many cases, but they don't access it. Right. And so, so I'll mention this name a few times probably throughout this conversation. The director of travel, fish, and game there, his name is Art, and he is this unique guy who has done so much good on the reservation. And if he had more resources, could multiply that impact, 100-fold. But at the same time, he's dealing with all the challenges of being director of travel, fish, and game. But he's got a very strong youth initiative to solve some of these problems, right? So opportunities for kids to go out in the backcountry, opportunities for them to immerse in their own culture and do all those things. So just backing up to travel, fish, and game more on that topic. So, you have that law enforcement side, right? And then on the management side, on that front, they do get some help from two pretty amazing U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service biologists. I've had the opportunity to see these guys work. They definitely share our goals and commitment to Wind River, but like most people who work on the reservation are short-staffed and underfunded. I'll just make a comparison here. So down the road a few hours, you have Yellowstone National Park, similar geographic footprint, right? Obviously, it's Yellowstone. They get a lot of visitors. But that park employs upwards of 100 non-law enforcement professionals every year to manage fish and wildlife, right? I mean, you have some of those same resources, but because it's a reservation, they don't have access to the funding, to donations, to all those things that the Park Service has access to. And so, again, an impossible task to adequately manage and conserve the amazing fish and wildlife populations on the reservation. But positive note here, we really believe that all this can improve jobs, management, enforcement, all those things, if we're successful in deploying our model there. So I'm talking a lot here, so interrupt me at any time.
No, it's fascinating.
Let's just take a step back a bit. So when we go into projects, we're really sensitive to the history of others coming in to solve problems and disappearing. Mm-hmm. And there's no greater example of that in the world than on the U.S. reservation system, right? Yeah. And so our approach is a bit different in that we want to create, sustainable livelihoods through entrepreneurship. And yes, again, we're willing to invest in that. But at the end of the day, we don't take a stake in it, and it needs to be driven by that local population. So, we spent almost 4 years just going to the reservation regularly and hanging out and meeting people and building relationships built on trust and doing all that stuff before we ever talked about what we did or how we do it or what impact we think we can have there. Because they've had so much history with people like, oh, I got your solution. Here's some money. Do something with it. Or I got a solution, but you have to do it this way. I don't care about all the other factors of what you think about your culture, whatever. And look, there are lots of great organizations that work within that system. But, they're sensitive to that as well. And so, we took 4 years in our time to make sure that we had those relationships in place and really that trust in place before we, really laid out a game plan. And so in October of 18, the Intertribal Council. So again, you have two tribes there, which is a little bit unique in that, there's a proverbial line in the sand almost, and each tribe has their own resources and entities when it comes to like housing and sanitation and all the utility type stuff. And then the Intertribal Council comes together and does system-wide initiatives, right? Reservation-wide initiatives. And so that's made up of council members from each tribe. There's a co-chairmanship, the whole 9 yards. So Art and I presented this plan that focuses on utilization of Wind River's amazing resources to create jobs. And really the jobs are created in the project, or the jobs created through the project are designed to do a few things, right? So they're designed to promote increased youth awareness of what's in their backyard, if you will, getting them off the highway. That can look and come to fruition in a multitude of ways, right? Like that can be camps, that can be having a guide school, that can be a few of those things that we've already started, incorporating the value of culture as taught by Shoshone and Arapaho leaders, right? So again, how do you get people, and this is a huge issue of importance for the council members who see their aging population and that institutional knowledge of their culture literally dying off, and it's not being passed down to the next generation. And one day it's going to disappear, and they realize that, and we understand that, and we want to help. And look, the other thing is that only enhances a visitor's experience to that place, right? I mean, you don't want to go fishing on the reservation with a guide from Jackson. And there are many of them who do that, and they're great. And they've been very helpful to us, and nothing against them. But if I want to go, I want to hear the stories of what took place on that reservation 100 years ago. Yeah. And I want to hear, like, what are the cultural traditions and norms that are different from mine? And so that is a differentiator when you look at booking a trip, or who books a trip, right? So that is also important to the business side. But I'll get back to the point here. Providing sustainable opportunities for people to stay on the reservation, right? There are just simply not enough jobs for everyone. And, when you don't have a job, that leads to all those other things that happen on the reservation that you can take part of, right? Which aren't always positive. Obviously developing strong conservation ethics is important to us, conserving their largest asset. If we're successful there, one of the first things that I would ask the councils to do would be to increase arts budget. I mean, you gotta have the assets in place to make sure that the experience remains good, just in terms of population numbers and things like that. Promoting these healthy opportunities for kids. I touched on that a little bit already, but there are endless opportunities for kids to get involved in things that they shouldn't be involved in. And if we can get them passionate about conservation and outdoors, and whether that be fly fishing or something else, that mitigates that risk a lot. And then just raise awareness of the reservation as an outdoor destination. Now, we get a lot of pushback on this one, right? Because there are a lot of people who know about the Wind River Reservation and its amazing fishing. And, they want to keep that a secret. And look, that's not their secret to keep, to be honest with you. Yeah. And I'm happy to have that conversation with anyone. The need for these people to survive heavily outweighs those people's or those anglers' honey hole, right, if you will.
At 2.3 million acres, sounds like there's plenty of backcountry and river to explore.
Yeah, and what's unique there, and what fires me up about the reservation is, we use fly fishing as a tool, right? And we'll always use fly fishing because we know it works, and we're obviously all passionate about it. But when you take a look at Wind River and what it can offer, I mean, world-class mountain climbing, world-class biking, right? Mountain biking, hiking, backpacking, all these things, right? So you can take and start a fly fishing model, but then that blows up and expands into all these other outdoor type recreational opportunities that are endless, really, if we do it right. And so, look, I'll say this just to kind of wrap this up, but I feel like we talk a lot about objectives and how, in our humble view, we can attain them within our organization. But this project in particular has a bigger end goal than simply meeting those objectives, right? The greater end goal here is really impacting the youth and instilling them with this deep respect for not only themselves, because sometimes that is lost, but also for their tribes and culture and history and natural resources that surround them, right? I mean, you have, I mean, this is where Sacagawea is from, right? I mean, you have so much history on this reservation, let alone wars and all of that. It's just a truly unique place filled with truly amazing people, that we think can have a lot of success if we do it right. But that's the thing, you gotta do it right.
Yeah, and so what I think is that I'm loving, or that I'm hearing you say that I love, is, when it sounds like, y'all's focus on the community and the people and, the genuineness of that, um, that builds that trust. But if you can educate youth, right, and it's the same thing that, not to bring it back to me, but it's similar, and I think probably a lot of fly anglers have the same experience, is that you love it so much that you will protect what you love. You will have a connection to something to say, I'm willing to go to bat for this, and I will stand up and fight people who are trying to take that away from me for other reasons. And it's a similar experience, and it doesn't have to be fly fishing. It could be anything. It could be climbing, like you said. It could be whatever it is that connects you to nature and gets you back out. And I think that's probably a problem in America with society at large, not just on this reservation, is getting that next generation connected and dialed and saying, look, this is, for me personally, hearing all of these success stories, I love that it's focused on the people who, if they fall in love with their natural resources, they'll protect them, and that creates job growth and economic opportunities for the communities. And it sounds like y'all are knocking it out of the park because you're replicating a successful model. So thank you. How can people support Indifly? And then I will also want to see if you have any sort of closing remarks or anything you'd like to make before we jump off.
Yeah, before I get to that, and thank you for asking that. I'll just go back to one thing on Wind River, and you can edit this in a way that flows a little bit better. But what we're really trying to do there is spark a passion, right? And that passion, as you just mentioned, can be a catalyst for conservation and doing good. Yeah. And I'm just taken aback by, I'll just share one story. I'm not pressed for time. I hope you aren't either. But there was this kid that we met on one of those first trips that was involved in this mentorship program. He came to the reservation system a little bit later in his life. Certainly had some troubles. I'll leave his name out of it. He got deeply involved in the outdoors through this project, not ours, someone, the on reservation project. And, he ended up joining the it's a joint Montana, Wyoming Conservation Corps. And it just really led to some amazing things in his life. Now he's running the ancestral tribes program for that organization, which, is not only on reservation systems. So when you talk about ancestral lands, you're talking about, where everybody in that native culture used to live, right? And so it's a wide stretch, and he's got a big responsibility. But I hadn't talked to him in a couple of years, and I happened to run into him on the reservation, and he had just got back from climbing Kilimanjaro, and it just blew my mind, right? I mean, like, you take someone whose scope was so limited to, I'm going to be on this reservation for the rest of my life, and it is what it is, to all of a sudden, like, I just climbed Kilimanjaro. Traveled halfway across the world, right? I mean, like, anyway, awesome. That is amazing. So thanks for asking how people can support. So I'll ask a couple things. One is simply share Indifly with your friends and family. I feel like the more people who know about the organization, what we do, is great, and really about the communities, right? Book a trip to one of the projects when things return to normal, of course. If you want more information on that, don't hesitate to reach out. You can do that through our website or email me or whatever. But I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to talk about, the needs as well. So all these communities that we serve sustain themselves through ecotourism, right? Nobody's traveling anywhere this year. So they're being hit pretty hard with really no safety net, right? We don't see the bottom of this thing. Vaccines are great, and hopefully they work, but it's going to take some time to return to normal, especially traveling, to these unique places. So all that time, we continue to serve these communities we operate in. Just like you can't go anywhere, we can't, host some of our largest fundraisers. So we got to find ways to bring these funds into our mission in other ways, right? I've listened to your podcast, and I will make an assumption that, like your listeners are probably believers in sustainable economies and empowered communities and conserving resources and or the entrepreneurial spirit. So, I'd simply ask, as everyone contemplates their annual giving, please consider Indifly, supporting the important work that we do. And there are a few ways that people can do that. So we have this thing called the Indifly Corps. This is a group of monthly givers that are on a mission to improve Indigenous communities. So you become not only an important investor in our cause and help the communities that we serve, obviously, but through that recurring donation, you get some unique benefits, right? So, we do a monthly drawing. That drawing ranges from, a t-shirt and a hat to, entering to win a trip to one of our locations. You get some exclusive content from these locations. And look, it doesn't take much, $20 a month, whatever anybody can give. But, like for less than 66 cents a day, you can have pretty major impact in the communities that we serve, right? So that's another way. You can also make a one-time donation on our website if you're so moved. That's just Indifly, INDIFLY.org. And then we also sell some pretty cool merch and stuff on the website, including some custom rods built by this third generation rod builder on the Wind River Indian Reservation. So those are just a few ways, but again, share these stories with your friends and family.
Yeah, I absolutely love doing this interview, but the stories of the people, I feel like every single one of those could be its own documentary just on, you know what I mean? It's incredible, the impact that Indifly is having, but also the communities who have decided that this is a model that they want to take a look at. It sounds like it's working, so I myself included,